Let me just slither in here.
Come on. You need some help. I just sat on my bruised leg.
I'm sorry.
Welcome to the FALA Upcast, a bi-monthly podcast where we watch movies and talk about them. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and today's guests are Indy and Jasmine.
Hello.
Hi.
In today's episode, we're reviewing Howl's Moving Castle, the 2004 animated film written and directed by Hayao Miyazaki. This Studio Ghibli movie was based loosely on the novel of the same name by Diana Wynne Jones. This story follows Sophie Hatter, a young girl who was cursed by the Witch of the Waste, turning her into an elderly version of herself. Sophie seeks refuge in Howl's moving castle and works as his cleaning lady. Howl is an irresponsible wizard who gave his heart to a demon when he was a child and has been without it ever since. Over the course of this movie, Sophie grows to love Howl despite his flaws, and she returns his heart to him, and her curse is ultimately reversed.
Jasmine, you picked this movie.
Why don't you tell us a few things that you like about it?
Okay, well, I've always been a fan of Ghibli movies. I own many of them. There are very few that I haven't seen. But this one in particular, I really like because I really like the character Calcifer, who is the fire demon spirit in Howl's Moving Castle. He's very lively. Calcifer is the demon that holds Howl's heart. So when Howl was cursed, he eats a shooting star. It's a very interesting scene. And then he vomits up his heart? No, he eats the star and then the heart comes out of his chest. And that is Calcifer. Calcifer really likes eating eggshells. And I have never wanted to eat eggshells more in my entire life than in that scene where Calcifer eats the eggshells. They just look so delectable, like little chips of calcium.
Is that why he's called Calcifer? Because he likes calcium?
Maybe.
Ooh. Wow. Hidden secrets.
Lore. Easter eggs.
So
Easter eggs? Oh my god.
So this was my first time watching the movie, and I came away from it with, like, I obviously, like, noticed that it was, you know, very much anti-war, and, you know, the Howl and Sophie, like, romantic plot is kind of coexisting with the plot about war and about, like, critiquing nationalism and stuff like that. So I noticed that, but I didn't actually, like, I don't know, I didn't really, like, admire the intricacies of that until I started, like, researching the movie itself. Mm-hmm. What did you think? What were your first impressions?
This was also my first time watching the movie. I had seen a few other, I think, like, Grave of the Fireflies and Spirited Away by the same director. But I hadn't seen Howl's Moving Castle before, and I was like pretty surprised. I thought it was good, like the plot, and of course the animation is really beautiful. And to go off of like that kind of war plot, I I thought that it was just gonna be like pretty like a side part of the story, but it was very like integral, I would say. And the critique of like war and nationalism, I thought that it wasn't very, like, sly. It was a very big plot, like, very big part of the plot.
Yeah, I remember, like, one of the characters has the line, like, only idiots believe what they read in the news or something, and they had all these, like, little dialogue pieces kind of about, like, propaganda, like, about how, you know, Howl just doesn't want to have to be forced to serve the government, and for that he's kind of viewed by, what's the name of the kingdom? Whatever kingdom Sophie lives in, they kind of view him as like some evil wizard because he doesn't want to serve the government and he doesn't want to be involved in the war. So I thought it was interesting how blatant that was, but I also appreciated how, like, it was like a sweet movie. Like it had some like darker subject matter, but like overall, I think like all Studio Ghibli films, like they feel so like lighthearted and joyful, and obviously the animation is so like vibrant and beautiful.
Right. It wasn't like a war movie in the same way Dunkirk is a war movie.
Yeah.
It was like a movie with war in it. But
Yeah,
I did
totally.
actually like really appreciate that too. Like there's a scene where like paper like flyers are falling out of a plane and they're like shouting, they're like, "Don't read the propaganda," and like I just and the views of like government and like the news, I feel like are, even though this film is from a while ago, I still would say it's very prevalent today.
I don't know. What do you think about, like, kind of the political commentary? Do you love the movie for its, like, political statements, or do you love it for its, like, comforting, nostalgic, like, the sweetness of it?
I would say that I like the movie for the sweetness of it. The, like, the political views in the movie, I think it's really cool what Hayao Miyazaki does with almost all of his movies. They're almost all commentaries on things like the environment, war. But this movie in particular, I like the more comforting aspects. But in some of his other movies, I prefer the more political side of things.
Yeah. And when I was doing a little bit of research on the movie and Hayao Miyazaki, it like makes sense like why so many of his films are like critiques of government, and you know, this movie is so blatantly anti-war because Miyazaki grew up in the midst of air raids on Japan in the 1940s. He had to leave Tokyo when I believe like a bombing in like either 1941 or 45 happened. So growing up with that, I think it makes sense that he chooses like to express these political views through his movies. And I found it really interesting when I was looking a little bit more into him as like a person. He didn't accept his Oscar for Spirited Away because he didn't want to visit the U.S. because like we're a country bombing the Iraq, and so it was like his protest on the Iraq War, which I found really interesting. I mean, I'm not somebody who loves war, so I kind of like support those messages and beliefs. But yeah, also like the fact that at first like it's so cliche, you know, like a like dashing wizard, and like, you know, the protagonist, she gets like cursed by this like scary witch who like messes up her life for no reason. But I found it really interesting how the Witch of the Waste, like at first she seems like she's going to be the main antagonist of the plot, and then she just becomes like a comic relief side character. And he does that in a lot of his films that he writes, where like the antagonists become like secondary characters and a greater evil is revealed, which in this case, the greater evil was the government and the war and the cost of the civilian lives and the harm to the cities. But that's just what I personally liked and took away.
I also think it's really interesting in this film in particular, the use and degradation of gender roles in the film. Obviously, I mean, Sophie still acts as the cleaning lady, right? But in the beginning of the movie, when she has brown hair and she works in the hat shop, she's not really seen as conventionally attractive, at least by the other characters. She's like, you know, this homely little... she's 18, so... But she's, like, not really in it with society. She doesn't view herself as very pretty, and she gets turned into this kind of ugly-looking old lady, right? But it's obvious that throughout the movie that Howl doesn't see her that way, as this old lady, and that he's seeing her for the person that she is. And then, you know, in the end, it's like they're up in the castle in the sky. Shout out to another Ghibli movie, Castle in the Sky. They're in the castle that is now flying in the sky. And they're both... Sophie is back to her younger self and is seen as more attractive. I think it's really interesting how Howl is not focused on her looks.
Yeah, and I felt that was really nice too, to like see there's this one shot where Howl is looking at Sophie, but he's not seeing her as her exterior like old lady look, even though she still has the curse to like show that he sees the real her. But if I could just touch on what Jasmine said about Sophie being 18, I had no clue. I thought this girl was 12. And I was like, why is this grown man Howl hitting on a 12-year-old girl? But I guess that's just like the animation or something. But for some reason, I thought that she was like so young. So I was just like, I did not trust Howl. I was like, not my fave.
Yeah, I was a little confused by the fluidity of her like curse. Because there would be moments where she would transform, like, into her younger self and then get snapped back into her, like, elderly form. I had to, like, Google, like, what was happening because I was just, like, so confused on, like, how magic worked in the world and, like, why her aging was never consistent. Like, sometimes she would be, like, really elderly and, like, could barely walk. And then sometimes it would just be, like, herself, but maybe, like, in her 30s. And, like, what the consensus I got from the internet is like the curse, like the cure to her curse was like falling in love and like accepting that she was in love with Howl. And so it kind of ebbed and flowed her age in moments where she loved Howl more openly. And then when she was like in denial of her feelings, she reverted back to her like really elderly self. I don't know. You have more knowledge on this movie, so is that like your interpretation of the curse?
Yeah, I would say so. In the moments when she is talking about Howl, specifically in the moment where she is talking to, I don't even remember her name, but the main Solomon, the main antagonist, Solomon, when she's talking to her about how Howl isn't just some washed up wizard trying to, keep this power all to himself. She continually gets more young until the Solomon says, I get it, you're in love with Howl. And then she automatically snaps back. So I feel like that's a really good example of her, defending Howl and kind of realizing her feelings in this like rant of passion where she gets younger and younger, and then once the Solomon like actually says the word, she's like, oh no thanks, and then she's old again.
And I think like you were mentioning before we started filming, like the line where her hair stays gray even after her curse is broken, and like Howl is like, oh, your hair is just like starlight. And I thought it was really cute how that was taken like directly from the book, because Miyazaki did take really extensive like creative liberties. Like it's pretty loosely based on the novel, but that did stay true. Like that part of her curse like did linger. So I thought that was cute.
I also think the line about the starlight is a nice callback to this falling star that Howl consumes.
Oh, I didn't even realize that.
Sophie, your hair looks just like starlight.
I didn't even realize that. That's so cute.
Another fun little Easter egg is in the very beginning of the movie when Howl comes up to Sophie and he says, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. It's like, in the beginning, you're like, who is this man? This attractive man. Who is he, though? Like, why does he know Sophie? It's because Sophie goes back in time and tells Howl's younger self to find her in the future, which is exactly what he does.
I noticed that part, but I didn't notice the starlight part. That's so cute.
I feel like this would be a good film to watch, like, more than once to, like, catch all these little details. And I just feel like I feel like it's the little details in this movie that really make it what it is. It makes it like super comforting, like all the detail in like the food. Like the food looks so delicious.
So good.
And also I like how even though there are all these details, they don't really spend too much time trying to like explain all the rules of like the magic and what these different groups are, and like how like came to be, like how he grew his like powers and stuff like that. I feel like it's better to just kind of let your mind like fill in the gaps rather than give us a bunch of like information, because I feel like often world building in like in a universe that's like this rich can be really dull, but I feel like they kept it like really, I don't know, fast paced and lively.
Yeah, especially the detail in the animation. Like, that's something that's consistent in, like, all Studio Ghibli works. But the detail in Howl's room, like, all of those knickknacks, and, like, in her dream sequence where she's, like, chasing him, like, through, like, a tunnel of some sort, like, or a cavern or something, and, like, the detail of, like, all, like, the little knickknacks and things, like, embedded in it, and, like, that being present, like, in his castle itself, like, even in the background shot for just a split second, like, it must have taken, like, hours to animate, like, all those little shiny, like, objects and treasures, and it was so impressive. Like, you could pause the movie at any point and it would make, like, a beautiful picture.
That's one thing that I really like about Ghibli films, is that they never spend too much time actually, like, having exposition define the world and its limits. It's all just like moving through it. You kind of learn what the rules are just by watching the film. And a lot of the time, I mean, especially in Howl's Moving Castle, it's very fluid. Like, you have the dream sequence, like, what is reality and what isn't? Like, is the going back in time, is that part of her dream sequence? But then it's also like, that's how Howl finds her in the beginning, or at least it's a theory of how Howl finds her. So is that, like, not part of the dream sequence? And then, like, is time travel real? It opens up, like, a whole box of questions. But I just feel like one thing that is really great about those movies is that they don't spend time explaining it. It just is.
Yeah. And to kind of, like, go back onto what, like, both you and Elizabeth were saying, like, I feel like Howl himself as, like, a character is really, like, well-rounded. He has a lot of depth to him. Even though he has some petty moments, like when he freaks out about his hair being dyed. And it's like, dude, it's not that big of a deal. But, like, his little treasure cave, and, like, the fact that when he shapes into, like, into a bird, he's kind of like a crow, and it's very, like, reminiscent of, like, how crows will just, like, pick up shiny things. And to me, it really gives this feel that he's, like, been, like, around the world, and he's seen, like, all these different, like, items and treasures, and he's kind of, like, built this, like, a life, and so he's kind of, like, hesitant to let Sophie into it, which I just thought was a really nice detail.
And, like, the found family and, like, the way these characters just kind of, like, seamlessly integrate into each other's lives without, like, real, like, explanation. Like, it doesn't feel, like, forced. It's just, like, we get, like, no backstory of, like, why Markle is living in the castle. I'm pretty sure there's backstory in the book where, like, he, like, came to seek refuge similar to Sophie, but in the movie we get no explanation for Markle, but, like, Howl treats him like family. Like, we know that they're not actually family, but, like, they love each other, and they even accept, like, Witch of the Waste into their home, and Turnip Head, and yeah, no, just, like, kind of that, like, found family, and, like, the sweetness of the characters. Like, yeah, even though Howl is, like, a little flawed, you know, he's overall, like, just, like, an abundantly kind character. But I thought that was really sweet.
And even how, like, the Witch of the Waste, like, she was made out to, like, be this bad character, but then as we, like, get to know her more, we just know that she's just, like, kind of like a sad old woman who just, like, wants love, and to, like, see her, Sophie helps her, even though, like, the Witch of the Waste was nothing but, like, harmful to her by, like, giving her this curse. She still, like, helps her up the stairs, or encourages her, I guess, and then like, takes her back to the castle and just kind of, like, comforts her and stuff like that. I felt it was really nice.
Can we talk about how scary that scene was, though, when when the Witch of the Waste was walking up the stairs?
The sweat. I was also, like, freaked out when they, like, turn on, like, the lamps and, like, singe her. I was like, oh. I was watching it kind of, like, late at night. I was like, I feel like if I was a child watching this, I would be spooked right now. I'd be, like, downright scared.
Every time anyone's like, Ghibli movies are just for kids. No, they're not.
Grave of the Fireflies.
Have you seen Spirited Away? That film will give you nightmares.
Yeah, I like that they are, like, children's movies. Like, they are, I think they're, like, rated PG or G. They are, like, targeted towards kids, but, like, he's not afraid to bring maturity into it. Like, I feel like a lot of Studio Ghibli movies, even ones that are not like written or directed by Miyazaki, like Grave of the Fireflies, for example, are like, there's like an aspect of maturity to it. Like, they have a purpose, like they have commentary that they want to be made. And I think it's just like, they're works that can be appreciated like at any age. Like, I know I was like blown away by obviously the animation, but the soundtrack as well. Like, that was the main thing I heard from people when I asked people, oh, why do you like Howl's Moving Castle? Like, the soundtrack composed by Joe Hisashi, I think, is just like so beautiful, and it's so like iconic and recognizable.
And I like how it has like the main theme of Howl's Moving Castle is kind of like used as like a motif throughout like little moments before it's like finally tied in at like the very end with like its full like symphony arrangement. I thought was really nice and like very, I don't know, satisfying to see it progress.
Do you know what the name of that song is called?
No.
Merry-Go-Round.
Yeah, it's called Merry-Go-Round, which I think is quite fitting for the movie. It's kind of like a merry-go-round, especially with like the time travel. It's all very circular.
Yeah. I think one thing that like kind of frustrates me honestly about a lot of Ghibli movies is that the plot isn't like super structured. You know what I mean? Like, that's a personal thing where like when I finished watching Howl's, I was like, so what was like the plot arc of this movie? Like, what? Like, when I was coming to like write my summary of like, you know, because I give a really brief synopsis at the start of every episode, I was like, what do I focus on here? Because like, I mean, I guess like the curse is like what started the story, but I mean, Witch of the Waste isn't the villain. The curse isn't like the focal point of the movie, in my opinion. I think like in many ways the war is the focal point. So it's just like, I don't know, I like the like content of it, but it was hard for me to like really break down the plot in its most basic aspects. I think it's like a really intricate, and it's really fluid, and it's really ambiguous, like with how everything works in the world. Like, you don't get really clear explanations of things, I think, because like it's not specifically catered only to children. Like, it leaves room for like adults to interpret things when they watch it. But I don't know.
The plot like didn't really, I feel like it didn't bother me as much. I was just like pretty accepting. I was just like, okay. It's like, they're living with the Witch of the Waste. Okay. There's this war. Sure. It's just like, but I do see how that is like kind of difficult, like especially for, I feel like younger audiences would have like a harder time processing like the plot, but I feel like the morals and like the takeaways are still like really strong, and I feel like that's mainly like what grounds it is more of like the character development and like the character arcs than like the plot.
Totally.
Because like the war is never like resolved, but we
That's
get like
true.
a resolution with like Sophie and Howl's stories.
Yeah.
And Turnip, what is his name? Turnip Head?
I think it's just Turnip Head. Well, he was actually like a prince.
Yeah.
But
oh, well, I guess that did resolve the war then, because he's like, I'm gonna go home and tell my folks to stop the war.
That's the thing that like frustrated me, because I was like, it seems like the war is so integral, and I think like if this was written like, I think by like any other director or something, and they were just like making it more clear, less ambiguous, like it would probably, the prince being like the reason for the war happening and him being like a turnip would be like the focal point. But the fact that it's such an afterthought, like I'm pretty sure like the explanation of him being the missing prince happens like within 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And then we just don't see him again. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's like kind of the comedy of it. Like, I don't know. I thought that was so funny. Like, yeah. But, I don't know. The characters, like you said, are, I think, the defining part of the movie. Like, they're so lovable.
Markle.
Markle's my fave. I know Calcifer is your fave.
Calcifer.
Who's your fave?
I don't know. I have a hard time picking favorites. I'm just very indecisive.
That's fair. Yeah, no. I was Team Markle all the way. I loved Markle. I don't know. Are there any other like thoughts that you guys want to elaborate on?
I felt that it was kind of like interesting. I know we talked about like the found family aspect, but just comparing Sophie's like found family of like the people who like live in the castle, especially at the end, versus like her actual family, like her sister and her mother, we only ever like see not being like super like caring towards her, and never really like putting Sophie first. They're kind of like wrapped up in their own worlds, and Sophie sometimes just like floats in and out of it. Like we see her mom use like Sophie as like a way to just like get to see her husband again, and like when we see Sophie with her sister, it's just kind of like not super like thoughtful. Like we see her having like a lot of conversations with the other characters, and so it was just interesting to like, I don't know, see the dynamic between the two.
Yeah. Do you have any other like closing thoughts as we wrap up this episode?
No.
Why did it move?
Why did Howl's castle move?
So that the government couldn't find him.
Yeah.
It's just when I googled like Howl's moving castle to get like date of release, like director, that sort of thing, like the first like search that people had was, why did Howl move his castle? And I thought that was so funny. But yeah, I don't know. I thought the movie was sweet. I was definitely confused, and I definitely had to Google some things for clarification. But overall, I thought it was very sweet. I thought it was nice to watch in the sense of like animation, it's impeccable, soundtrack was beautiful, characters so lovable. And it's definitely like a very distinct movie. I don't know. What are your closing thoughts? Closing thoughts?
I would love to watch it again, just to see like all those little details that I missed. And just like if I'm just like feeling down or something, I do feel like it's a really comforting movie that I would definitely revisit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Growing up on Studio Ghibli and watching Howl's Moving Castle as I was growing up, I feel like you said, it's timeless, and I feel like it's meant for all ages. There are so many, like every time I watch it, I feel like I'm learning something new about it. Definitely as a child, I did not understand the political aspect of it. Yeah. And it was a little scary at points, but that's just how it is when you're a kid, and the more you grow up and watch it, you see different things than you would have. And I just think that's really cool about Ghibli movies, is that you can watch them over and over again and still find something new. It's never boring.
Yeah, they're definitely works of passion. Like you can tell that this was not made like to be super easily digestible and marketable, and like it's just like a work with like love and such an impeccable attention to detail. And I think that's an admirable quality amongst like all Ghibli films. So I enjoyed it. Thank you for recommending. Thank you for
You're
being
welcome.
a guest. Thank you for being a guest.
Anytime.
And I will see you guys in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.